Hello, everybody, and welcome to 11 Questions Live. Tonight is special because I get a chance to talk to someone who is actually literally one of my favorite writers. If you've been involved in any kind of way with speculative fiction, you probably have heard of Eugen Bacon. If you have not, then you must be hiding on a rock somewhere. Um, Eugen is one of the rock stars of speculative fiction and specifically Black speculative fiction. And tonight, there's so many things that she's done over the past few years, and we could talk for hours. But tonight, we're going to be focusing on something special. We're going to be focusing on a book that she edited, and I've had the privilege to publish, which is called Languages of Water. We're going to be talking about that tonight. So I want to start off by reading her bio, and then we're going to get into things. Well, before I do that, let me just say, hey, Eugen, how you doing?
Hey, Milton, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making time. I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time. This is actually the second time I had a chance to interview you. The first
Yeah,
time, go ahead.
it was really amazing when I came to Atlanta. And how do you say it? Atlanta? When I came to
That's it.
Atlanta for the launch of my book, Claiming Timor by Meerkat Press. And you were there, you were my MC, and it was amazing. It was a really good connection from the very first time that I met you. I knew that you and I would do something great together. So it's amazing when you agreed to do Languages of Water with
I was
me.
I was happy. I mean, when we talked about it, and I said, "Hey, Eugen, what you got going on?" And you said, "Bam!" I had this book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read your bio first, and then we're going to get into the book. So for those people who, for some odd reason, have not heard of you, I want to give you guys a little bit of what Eugen is all about. Um, Eugen M. Bacon, MAMSC, PhD, is an African Australian author of several novels and fiction collections. She's a twice World Fantasy Award finalist, a British Fantasy Award finalist, a Forward Book of the Year Silver Award winner, and was announced in the honor list of the 2022 Otherwise Fellowships for doing exciting work in gender and speculative fiction. Dane the Black Thing by Transatlantic Publishing was a finalist in the BSFA Forward, Aurelius, and Australian Shadow Awards, and made the Otherwise Award honors list as a sharp collection of Afro-Surrealist work. Eugen's creative work has appeared worldwide, including in award-winning Australian writing, Fantasy Magazine, Fantasy and Science Fiction, and Year's Best Speculative Fiction. Her new releases are Serengeti, Languages of Water, Major Fools, Chasing Whispers, and An Earnest Blackness. Now, I mean, and that's only a vision of what Eugen has been able to accomplish over the few years that she's been here. I mean, this is like it's been amazing. I'm in awe. People say I write a lot, but I don't compare to this. I don't compare to Eugen at all.
Thank you so much, Milton. And it's always a little bit embarrassing listening to someone read your bio. And so that's the formal bio. But the informal one, when I talk about me, I say that I am African Australian, and that the one is not exclusive from the other. I am okay with my dualities, my hybridity. I am betwixt a sum of many. I am a daughter of the Wajita people of Tanzania in East Africa, and now I live in Australia, which is my home country. So I am a daughter of this land that belongs to the Wurundjeri and Bunwurrung people of the Kulin Nation.
That's amazing. It really is. Me having done some study of East Africa and being somewhat familiar with Tanzania. I'm always grateful for what you've been able to share with me as far as the Swahili language as well. So so let's get down into this. Now, Languages of Water is a unique anthology. And I'm going to let Eugen talk to you about the origin of this and where it came from. And I think she is going to also share her first story, which is like the foundation of this anthology.
Yes, no, really, thank you. So, what happened in 2021 during the crux of the pandemic? I got a surprise email invitation to do a digital fellowship which is run, it's called the Writers Immersion and Cultural Program, so RICE. And basically, it's been running for, it runs across 13 countries, and it includes writers from China, Indonesia, Japan, Vietnam, and Australia. And it's sort of like an Asia Pacific program. And what happened was during the conversations, and it was a 2-week fellowship. And so during the conversations where we shared our creativity, a common theme was coming up, which was water. And it seemed that water was very important to a lot of the participants. And so at the end of the fellowship, we were saying we should do something together. Let's not just say goodbye, we'll stay in touch on Facebook, because we probably won't. So what if we did a project together? And that's how Languages of Water came about. I had written this story, When the Water Stops. And it's really a story about, it's a Black speculative fiction that is what happens when water is so scarce that people must extract it from blood, but whose? And it's a really dire story, because at the end of the day, it's blood from the women in the village, the children, and it's a really dark, dark, somber story. So I sent this story out to different people, and I said, let's try a story in many forms of itself. Basically, I've written this story, now I'm giving you the power. Look at the story. How does it inspire you? Just do anything with it. And so people responded by writing their own stories. Some were stories related to climate change. Some were stories that were a little bit different. Some people sent illustrations, others wrote poetry, others wrote essays of the story. And then to my great surprise, I got translations as well. And so we got translations in Chinese, in Malay, and all the different languages. And so that's how this project, Languages of Water, came about. And that's also where the title of the story came about, like Languages of Water, all these different languages, cross-cultural, people coming from everywhere and sharing their thoughts of this one story in different forms of itself. And it was a really hard project for me in terms of it was letting go, almost like the death of an author. Sometimes it was really difficult seeing what people were doing with the story and just really letting go and not interfering and letting them do whatever they wanted to do with it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating collection. You know, when I read it myself, I was like, man, I love the different aspects of it. But what I think what we're going to do now is let you read that a portion of that story that got this whole project started.
Yes, please. I'll see if I can share my screen. And what I'll do, because there you go, because the story is about 15 minutes, but I'll just read a small sample of it. And basically, I created this presentation because sometimes the visual and text work really well together. And so this is When the Water Stops. And I'll read just across 3 slides of it.
Okay.
When the water stops. As the climate turned, it hurled at them bushfires that razed huts to the ground, dust storms that swept away families, drought, all the cattle and sheep gone, reduced to skin, then skeletons. At first, the villagers took turns on the bleed, sharing dreams and fears, understanding that as people, they were the same. But a typical grown male has a blood volume of just 5 liters. A 40% loss is deadly. The threshold, 39%, has only 92% water in it. The rest is washed away in glucose, hormones, proteins, fats, vitamins, mineral salts, and carbon dioxide. What good is it? Carbon dioxide may induce dizziness, tiredness, restlessness, convulsions, or coma. So, with all the minuses, how much water in a bleed could go around a village? They sifted the question on their minds as volunteers sucked on cactus leaves and sap, figs and desert ants, 4 to 8 weeks, having bled for the clan. But still, they were not strong enough to take another turn when it arrived. The loss was not replenished. So where first they volunteered, Now they drew sticks. It was plain luck or missed luck. A stick was a stick. A short one was short. If you drew it, your fate was sealed. Your only consolation that this death was not a lonely one, but a communion that met society needs. But even the sticks that were drawn eventually stopped. It was a sacrifice too big. So now it was a matter for those with money or bigger sticks to determine who to massacre, and that determined whose ash would float in the air, figuratively speaking. What really happened took place in the vat. The woman in the vat. What she's doing this week is sitting in a bowl right there in the heat shimmer. She's awash with memories of drowsing, unfolding, everything in slow motion. When she looks back on this time, what will she remember? She watches the smoke swirling like a benevolent hug, giant clouds bubbling out the words, "Where are you now?" Her soul is an object brightest in the sky. Today she's a bleed. Tomorrow is a wish. The leader of the nation. 10 years ago, the big leader came out of his shelter, keen to stand on the steps of a shrine opened as a museum to the Pope. He stunned human rights leaders, a few high courts, and many mothers when he pushed out his lip and held a Bible for 1 full minute as the cameras snapped. Riot police fell with fat sticks, rubber bullets, and gas masks on peaceful protesters brandishing slogans about the art of cherishing and love. What was a drop of blood when the economy outweighed civil unrest and stocks soared higher? Did you see the Dow? A gain of 267 points, and the advances in the Nasdaq Composite. Evolutionary theory was about natural selection, the form that would leave the most copies of itself. Light years on, every archbishop in an alternate universe, outraged by the misuse of a facility of worship, would consider the historic violation of the principles of humanity and utter three-spaced words. I can't breathe. Protests were ugly, thought the leader, and a new election was coming up. The rich woman in the metropolis. When the water stops, the blood must flow, says the woman with a rainbow diamond around her wrists. The $1 billion gift came from a cousin of a cousin of a great uncle whose name she tried to remember but couldn't. It was just too hard. She flourishes from the catastrophe of others. She blooms on the unimportant. In her cellar, beggars from the village. Theirs is a narrative she doesn't believe in, the kind of story reflected in old photos by art historians. Her fabric is the politics that gave rise to Hitler, Mussolini, and Amin Dada. She can't help it if those people don't belong in a near-perfect picture. Their mistakes, feelings of awkwardness that cast a different image, and it shifts every time she looks. It's never authentic. There are many books about humanity, but this is hard. Turn off the sound of their groaning, she snaps to her servants. The moaning is a sound that's never black or white. It doesn't obey the rules of composition. If their cry is a question, it's in a language of Babel. She doesn't understand its vowels, syllables, syntax, parables, or context, and it's impossible to try because that's so hard. What's not hard to understand is vintage produce that has a good nose. The ones from the village come at a good price and their blood is pure. It's uncontaminated by the city's pollution. Village blood wears the right acidity, a sweet aroma of smoke, bacon and pepper, violets inside a copper finish. And blood that's vintage must flow for the survival of her species. She cradles with affection a labradoodle puppy to her breast. Thank you. So the story goes on, and it gets worse and worse, especially to the woman in the village, to the poor man in the village, and eventually even to the children. And so the children are dispensable because if you have like 7, 13 children, each child to you is money. That's more blood that you can sell. So that's a really dire story, and I'll stop sharing now. And Milton, you can ask me more questions.
That was a great read. And I always tell people, I say the only thing better than reading a Eugen Bacon story is listening to Eugen Bacon read her story. Because
Oh, thank you.
you get the emotion and you get to feel and because when you read a story, you're interpreting it your own way, and how you're experiencing it. But when you read when you listen to a author read their story, you get the emotion that the author has and brings, and you do a really good job at bringing that emotion and setting that tone for that story. Someone would probably read it and not really get the full force of it unless they heard you read it, and they'll be like, oh man, this is something. This is deeper, than maybe they imagined. That's a great story, and I can see why it would be a foundation for an anthology. This book is this collection of stories is could be looked at some as climate fiction. And that's something that a lot of people have been thinking about lately. We can even look at now and see what's happening in our world today. I know in the United States with the wildfires and the heat domes and different things like that. What is that part of the message that you wanted to convey in this anthology?
Yes, so Milton, I am a very immersive writer and also a very immersive reader. I feel things very deeply. And I am passionate about motherhood, about climate action, about social justice, and stories of culture, heroing Black people's stories. And what I really wanted to do with this story was one, to capture the climate action, how, things are getting worse and worse, and what if it becomes so bad that we have to get water from blood. And then there's also the social injustice where the ones with money and with bigger sticks get to have a bigger say. And what happens to the people without money, people without a voice. And then I also wanted to bring in a little bit of culture and also to capture that the Black person in a story. So this is something that I really wanted to do. And writing this story, I felt it really deeply. And I was quite fortunate when Cherie Renee Thomas solicited it and published it. And that was the first publication of the story. And it got it was in the Locust recommended list for that year, which was really good. So the reception of the story itself was good. And when we're thinking about water at the end of that writer's fellowship, I thought this would be a really good story. One, because it's really short. Two, it's a little bit abstract, which means it's open to interpretation. And it's the kind of story that people could do anything with and they could play with it. And some of the stories that came out really, really fascinated me. Like there's even a story that is quite dystopian. There's a story of a fox. Like there are different kinds of poems, and it's just amazing what people did.
It is actually. Let me ask you a question. Did Was there a process about selecting the authors for this? Was it just it was a situation where it was stories from the part of the collective, or was it a situation where you had an opportunity to take a look at the different authors and select who you felt like would had a good sense of feel for what you were trying to do?
Yes, so initially I wanted all of the participants of the fellowship, and there were quite a number of them, to contribute anything. And then when they did, I realized that it's still not enough, because to get a reasonably sized book, and this one is just about novella length, it's almost 40,000 words, I
Mhm.
needed to have a little bit more. And I also wanted to give the anthology weight. And so, first, once the participants of the fellowship had talked to them and they sent in their submissions. And then I also went out and now did a targeted invite of other people. One, I really wanted a French translation. And so I invited Dominique Heck, who did a really wonderful French translation of it. I'd previously worked with Seb Dubinsky in the story The Failing Name, which became a finalist in the World Fantasy Awards. And so I invited him and he offered me a poem. And then I reached out to another poet, Oz Hardwick, who is very astonishing. Like when he writes something, he's very abstract and he goes anywhere. And I thought he'd do something really well with it. And then I was also teaching writing, and it was a way to encourage some of my students, especially the ones who were writing really well, and I could see potential in them, to come in and write something as well. And so I invited up one who was really, really good, and Erin, so Erin sent in a submission, and I was astounded by it, especially because her story was a motherhood story, and any story with mothers and children, just and in a climate challenged world, it was a very deeply moving story. And so that's how slowly I invited people, and then I worked with Claire Roden as well. I am the kind of writer, and we've participated in something together. I love collaborating with people, and it's really a relationship of trust and respect. And so people I'd worked with, I invited, and that's how the anthology grew and grew until it came to a beautiful size. And then Nuzo Ono, I thought, oh my God, I really need this one. I need Nuzo in this anthology. So I talked to her and she said, yeah, I think I've just the story for you. And so I was, yes, yeah, yeah.
It's great how anthologies come together like that. When you it's always to me it always looks like when you give your authors a certain charge or a certain objective, how they always exceed your expectations.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And so
And
it's
and
so go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things, the translations are, it really is a big lesson in trust, because basically you're giving somebody your story and asking them to translate it into a language that you don't even understand. So you can only hope that they got it right. Now, it so happens that one of the translations I gave to my sister to write a Swahili translation. So Aldegunda Matoyo, who's done the Swahili translation of When the Water Stops, she she wrote it so beautifully. And because I understood Swahili, I could read it and look, and sometimes I'd go, but this phrase, no, what I meant to say was, but I had to hold back and just let it be, because this is not my translation, and that is her interpretation of the story. And so it came back to that lesson in The Death of the Author, and you really have to let go and you have to trust it, because once you've written it, you don't know how the reader will interpret it. You know, how they're going to read it is different in their head, and they'll relate it to their own experiences, to their own expectations. And you just have to let go. You can't control it beyond that part.
And that brings me to another question too. I mean, having a book like this and having the translations in there. I mean, to me, that was unique. That's really unique. That's something that you very rarely find anywhere. I mean, what was the thought process behind it that led you to that decision to say I'm going to have these different translations in languages of water as well?
I didn't even decide it, because when I sent out the story and I say just do anything, the story in whichever form of itself. And so I left it to people to decide what form of the story they wanted. And it's only after I'd received a few translations that I thought, it would be really nice to have a French translation and a Swahili translation as well. But basically, I just, it was like giving the story away, do whatever you want with it. And the poetry was also really unique, and you will know this, Milton, because the layering and the formatting of the stories, people came with their own ideas and their own structures. And sometimes it's really different. Like you have the concept in your head, and then you have something that's standalone. But once you have to put it into a sum of the whole, and fit it squarely into something, then other considerations need to come in. And I'm really glad that we didn't need to change anything. I think most of everything we received we published it as it was.
Yeah, I think that was a really smart move to do that with the different translations because sometimes especially when you're thinking uh, 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 from a I'm not going to say a Western standpoint. I'm saying from an American standpoint, people would look at a book like this and think that the translations in there would make it more difficult to approach. But when you look at the book and you look at the authors and you look what it's about, it's to me it makes the book more inclusive because now you're making the story accessible to people who may not speak English or may not, different languages, but they see something that's in this book that they can read and that they can understand it. And we also know there's always, like they say, there's always something lost in translation. How we
That's
talk
right.
because some languages don't always, you don't some words mean different things in different languages and stuff. But to be able to read the story in Cantonese or read it in Swahili, and that way
Yeah,
you're a person that is from speaks those languages, you can really connect with it that way. I know
that's right.
both of us have had a chance to, even though our official release hasn't come yet, both of us have had a chance to share the book, and I've really been um, I'm not going to say surprised, but I've been pleased by the response of people who see the book and see what it's about. And then when they see the translations, they really light up. They're like, oh,
That's right.
and I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but I know I have.
Yeah, and it was a really big gamble because it's a project that is not your typical project, which meant that I had no guarantee of being able to publish it, particularly because it's combining nonfiction and fiction, short story and poetry, illustrations as well, translations, and the publisher may not even understand what the language says. But because they knew that there's a homing story, and so once you've read the homing story, you can only imagine what the translated language is saying. And I think it would be really beautiful if I could be able to have a session with the different authors and the different translators where they could read snippets of that in their language, in their voice, and in how they envision the story. And that would be really beautiful. And yes, it does have that inclusiveness to it. Anybody, once you read the homing story, you get the essence of it. And what I really enjoyed was also reading the essays, because we have a few essays where people talk about their interpretation and just how they see the story. And not every author gets to see this. Like you can see it in a review, but the review only takes this or takes that. So this is somebody who sat with the whole story and they wrote what they thought about the story, like how the story talked to them. And that was really fascinating.
Well, the fact that you brought up about being able to talk with the different authors and get their feedback on the stories is something that's really intriguing to me and something that we probably need to look at working out down the road. I think that would be amazing to talk to the authors and get their input and their interpretation. So let's talk about
That's
the
right.
cover. Let's talk about the cover of Languages.
Oh, that's my best mode. The cover. Talk about it. Because
I'll be honest, as a publisher, when um when you gave us the opportunity to publish this book, the artist, he was the first person to come to mind. I get a chance to work with a lot of different artists, and when I saw the book and I was like, I'm working with Eugen, and this is a deep book, and I like it. And the first person that popped in my head was John Jennings. It was a no brainer. So give me a little bit about of your because I know you had a chance to work with him on what your whole process with working with him on this cover.
oh, I love John Jennings to bits. I love everything he does. And just not just as an illustrator or a writer, just as a human being, he is one of the most amazing people to get to know. So when you told me John Jennings, I was like, oh my God, can we afford him? Because he is so good. This is a New York Times best-selling author and illustrator. And then I wasn't even expecting that you would send me early sketches. And it was amazing, like just being part of the process, looking at the sketches. And in this particular one, I literally put my hands up and I said, I am letting you, Milton and John, just do your thing. And I was really happy with the outcome. When you sent me the finished product, I was like, oh my God, this is better than I thought. It really captures, it encapsulates the anthology, like that sense of, you can almost say there's a bit of despair and there's something dystopian around it, but also the whole theme around the water and motherhood and, children and, oh, it's insane. And just the way the cover, the art is split, so it shows that dichotomy. It brings all these different languages together. It's I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorite covers in all my books, and I hope none of my other publishers are listening.
Well, reading the story and knowing you and understanding what it was all about, like I said, it was a no-brainer to pick John. But I've known John for a long time. I think back since 2008 when we first started hanging out together and stuff like that, and watching him evolve and watching his art evolve, and knowing that he would do the same thing with the artwork that you and the other writers have been able to do with the subject matter. So I just felt like it was a perfect choice there. I got one last question for you.
And then I have a question for you.
um, what what do you see as the legacy for Languages of Water? What do you want people to get from this book and understand from this book?
I think one of the things, other than the climate action message, I really like that concept of a story in many forms of itself. And I actually grew in the process of getting this project ready because I understood, one, as an author, once you've written the work and once it's gone out to the public, it's out of your hands. And I could see how different readers who became writers in the anthology, what they could do with it. And so it's just having that trust to be able to let go once you've written the story. And particularly because I said that I'm a very immersive writer. And I think first and foremost, I write for myself. I write about my curiosity. I write about things that I feel strongly about. And then once it's written, that letting go. And then it's also about bringing different cultures together. We live in a very diverse world. And I can also see, for example, what's happening in Australia. We have terrible things have happened to the First Nations people. I see what's happening in the US, not just in politics, but also I'm really grateful that as a Black mother, I don't have to raise a Black boy in the US. And so you can see themes of I can't breathe and the terrible things that happened to George Floyd and all of the, Black people. That really touches me deeply. Like I am miles away, but I feel it as if I am a mother, I am a sister, I am, it, it's part of me. And so this book brings all those different cultures together. It's almost like a book of harmony. While the theme is very somber, but there's that bringing together, saying that we can work together, we can do things together. The world doesn't have to be such a terrible place if we work together. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I can say that, like I said again, I was happy to be able to work with you on this project.
Mhm.
I mean, you're one of those, I call you one of those unique writers. You're one of those writers that, as an author myself, there's some authors that you read and you say, hey, this person's great, and this and that. But when I read your work, you are one of those authors that have a unique voice and a unique way of telling the story. That is, I'll say that is one of a kind. And
Oh, thank
so, and when I looked at doing this book with you, I felt like that book would probably come from that same energy.
you.
And
Yeah.
happy to be able to get it out there and put it out in the world, and looking forward to other anthologies that you will probably do in the future. And anticipating that. So you said you had a question for me?
I do, and it draws from what you've just said, Milton, because my question is like, this is the kind of project that people looked at it and they were like, yeah, this is amazing, fascinating, but no, it's not my kind of thing. Like they were thinking in terms of the commercialization of it or how would they publish it. Like they just couldn't see beyond the complexity of the project because they wanted something, something that they know, something familiar, and this is so unfamiliar. It's very unsettling. So, other than your knowledge of me and my writing, why did you touch it? Because others might not touch it with a badge pull.
The beauty of being an independent publisher, as I am, is that I get a chance to make decisions based on, I guess, say, coming from the heart. And I think also understanding that when you're dealing with some of the larger publishers, they're looking at this book as a commercial product, and they're trying to find something that's going to appeal to the largest group of people possible. Whereas from me being out as an independent publisher, I'm trying to um, produce what I feel that people will want to read, and I feel like readers are much more sophisticated than publishers give them credit for. And you learn this by being out and like I'm doing out doing conventions and festivals and talking to readers one on one and seeing that some of the things that people think readers have to have are not necessarily the case. That they're broad thinkers and they're open to new things, especially when you're dealing with speculative fiction writers. And like I said, you and I have both have been able to be out with the book with the Languages of Water and present it to people. The cover is captivating. When you explain to people what the book is about, you just see their eyes light up. And when they open it up and they see the book in different translations, that's usually what seals the deal because they see something that is going to they feel like I feel like they see something that's going to expand their mind, expand their knowledge and stuff. And that's what I'm about. I'm about being able to publish books and giving authors a way to express themselves the way that they want to express themselves. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not a person to tell you how to write. I feel like I'm a facilitator. You know,
Oh,
you know,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take this and let's get it to people the way that you want them to see it, because that way they get a true feel and a true energy of what you're trying to convey and stuff. But
Oh, yeah. I love your work, Milton. I really love your energy as well. And you being in the industry this long and also being so versatile, I think it helps a lot when you're an author. You can also understand the publishing side of things. You can see it differently. So you wear different hats, like you're an author and an editor and a publisher, and you're doing amazing things for Black speculative fiction. We need more Miltons, but you're the unique one.
well, thank you. So September the 1st, that is the official release for Languages of Water. Very excited about it. Matter of fact, we will be debuting it at Dragon Con, which is the largest speculative fiction convention in the Southeast. And I'm really, very, really excited about it. The book will be available everywhere books are sold. MV Media, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. The book will be available there, and very excited to let it out. Um, and I know Eugen is probably just as excited as well.
Yeah,
um, any
absolutely.
any final thoughts? Anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I think what I really love is that as a publisher, you've made this book available in all countries, which means that anybody in any Amazon from whichever country can order it, and so it's local, and they can locally print it and ship it to wherever, and that makes it really accessible. So I'm really happy. And if you wanted to find out more about my project, my website is eugenbacon.com, or you can connect with me on social media, but now without Twitter, well, on X. I'm still there, Eugen Bacon, but you can find me also on Threads, and I'm on Blue Sky as well. I'm Jenny at Blue Sky, but if you just look for me at Eugen Bacon, I'm there. And I'm really excited about this book. It's the kind of book that is open to quite a diverse section of readers. And I am taking it to a scholarly conference in October, because also it's something really valuable to creative writers, and also really useful when you're teaching approaches to writing, just that depth of the author, but also bringing together different kinds, forms, and genres of writing.
Yeah, so Eugen, thank you so much for
Thank
talking
you.
with us and allowing us to do this interview. We've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah.
Hopefully this won't be the last time I interview you. I know you have other great projects coming down the road, and I can't wait to see them. I can't wait to read them. This being one of them, but one of many. So again, thank you for coming to 11 Questions. Thank you to everybody for taking the time to watch this video. We'll have more coming along the way, and make sure that you visit Eugen Bacon. We will also have information to get in contact with her at the end of this video as well. So y'all take care, and thank you for coming to 11 Questions. Peace.
Thank you.